The idea of Europe as it is today did not come into existence until Catholic missionary monks began sharing the gospel in Northern Europe. Historian Douglas Jacobson wrote, "At the time when the Roman Empire first became Christian, the idea did not exist of a place called Europe. The Roman Empire was a water-based domain circling the Mediterranean Sea, and the area of land now known as Europe was simply the northern hinterland." Waves of Germanic tribes, also known as barbarians, migrated from Central Europe, especially in the 4th and 5th centuries AD, slowly occupying the western lands of the Roman Empire until the last Western emperor, Romulus Augustus, was deposed in 476. Political boundary lines were then drawn by neighboring tribes throughout Europe. Most of these Germanic tribes were pagan in their religious beliefs, but some were discovered to be Arians. How did Arian theology become popular among some of the Germanic tribes? The Arian missionary Ulfilas, who was born among the Goths in Central Europe in about the year 311, spent much of his life as a young man in Constantinople. Ulfilas was sent as a missionary to the Goths in particular, while Arianism was gaining ground in the mid-4th century, so his converts held to the heresy of Arianism. Generations later, they invaded and settled in the land of the Western Roman Empire. What were the Christians of the former Western Roman Empire to do? These Western Christians, or the ones who later came to be known as Catholic Christians, spent the next 5 or 6 centuries talking to their new Germanic tribal leaders and kings about the gospel and the orthodox theology of the Council of Nicaea. One major difference between the Catholics and the Germanic tribes was that the people of the Germanic tribes tended to convert to whatever religion their leaders chose to follow. Therefore, Catholic missionaries focused their efforts primarily on the Germanic tribal leaders. Some of the most successful and notable missionary movements in this era began in the British Isles. Christianity first spread into the British Isles when Roman armies conquered the southern portion of England in AD 43. Christians among the Roman invaders brought their early form of Christianity to the region. 4 centuries later, in the year 402, the Roman armies retreated to concentrate on defending Rome. England's first notable missionary was Ninian, who grew up among the Britons and was ordained and commissioned to preach the gospel to the Britons, Celts, and Pikes that lived in the area between Hadrian's Wall and the Antonine Wall. He began by attempting to organize the disorganized churches that already existed there, and then attempted to share the gospel with pagan leaders. In the year 397, Ninian established a center of operations called the White House, as a center from which he and his Catholic monk missionary friends could launch their efforts. The most notable Irish Catholic missionary of this era was Patrick. When he was 16 years old, Irish pirates kidnapped him from his British home and sold him as a slave in Ireland, where he was held for 6 years. He had a dream that he interpreted as a vision from God, which directed him to escape, so he did. After he returned home, he had another dream in which God called him to Ireland to preach the gospel to those who had kidnapped and enslaved him. He obeyed in 432 and began his work among the tribal leaders in Ireland. Within 15 years, according to reports, most of Ireland became Christian. Patrick is credited with the beginning of the Irish monastic movement and Irish Christian tendencies from that time forward. A third person of importance to the founding of the Church in England was Augustine of Canterbury. Augustine was the prior, or the ranking member in charge, of St. Andrew's Monastery in Rome when he and 40 other monks were commissioned by Pope Gregory I to re-establish the Church in England. He arrived at Kent in the summer of 597 and began conversations with King Ethelbert, whose wife Bertha was already a Christian. When the king converted, he allowed Augustine and the missionary monks to continue their work among the Angles and Saxons of his kingdom, as long as the missionaries promised not to use any strong form of coercion. Augustine set up his missionary headquarters in Canterbury, which was the capital city of Kent. As each kingdom converted to Christianity, their ecclesiastical center became Canterbury for all England. Though these missionary monks and church organizers had the blessings of Rome, a distinctly English form of Christianity began to form. Who was to lead the local churches established or re-established by the British monks? Instead of bishops over individual churches, the churches were led by the heads of monastic communities. What should a Christian do after they commit a sin? The distinctly Roman Catholic idea had been to have the sinner perform elaborate rituals over a period of time before being allowed back into a church to worship on the Easter following their sin. And there were only instructions given for what to do for one major sin. The distinctly Irish Catholic idea understood that Christians committed minor sins frequently. So a system of penance developed among the Irish in which they would go to regular confessions to their local priests, who absolved them in a less elaborate and public manner. The Irish practice would later gain in popularity on the continent and eventually become a regular feature of Western Catholic Christianity. The success of missionary monks in the British Isles soon became a model for the establishment of other monasteries and missionary work on the continent. The missionary monks of the early Middle Ages were loyal to Rome, but also adapted their presentation and practice of the gospel to local customs and ways of thinking. This process today is called contextualization, a way to communicate the timeless truths of Christianity to a wide variety of cultures.